Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Cast Dice, the podcast that explores the great big wild world of tabletop gaming that exists today. It's been said once or twice, mainly on this podcast, that we're in the middle of a gaming renaissance. There are just too many good games that we can spend our hobby time and our hobby dollars on. And it's hard to know what to play next. And I guess that's the purpose of this podcast. It's to dig into the games that my guests and I enjoy playing, to talk about big industry events, and to talk to the people who create these games. Now, if you are listening to this episode and you happen to look at the little title at the top of this episode, you would have seen that it is episode 200. Now, if you dig through the actual network, of course, with the Warlord cast and the Star Wars Legion cast and a couple of other bits and pieces that have happened over the years, the Ghost Army podcast, we are well over 200. But to celebrate the 200th episode of this show, I thought it would be a really fun idea to dig into something that I have been looking forward to for I can't even tell you how many years. Something that I am overjoyed for or overjoyed about, and is coming to us incredibly soon. And it happens to align with Cast Dice birthday, which is Halloween. So by the time you hear this, it will be just about Halloween. It is a wonderful birthday surprise. And I guess before I introduce our guests, I do want to take one tiny second to talk about why this is so exciting. If you've listened to the show at any point over the years, you would know that I am a sucker for nostalgia. I dig into my childhood at every opportunity, particularly on the gaming table, from creating a USS Flag, aircraft carrier board from Marvel Crisis Protocol, to 3D printing and converting heroes to look like the comic books I read as a kid, to converting a bolt action army to be my G.I. Joe collection as a child. You name it, I dig into it. And God, I guess one of my fondest memories as a child was Friday nights. And it was always either having a sleepover with some friends and going to the video store, because video stores had just been invented when I was about 8 or 9. So going to a video store and picking out one of the 10 movies that existed at that point on VHS was a really big deal. And we'd always go to Gregory's Pizza and get pizza and subs, and either go to somebody's house, or if, I wasn't having a sleepover, pulling up my favorite toys, be it Transformers, G.I. Joe, Thundercats, and in just sitting in front of the TV on a Friday night. I wasn't allowed to watch any other time but Friday night. And Friday night, we had the A-Team, we had Knight Rider, Miami Vice, you name it. All the best shows were on then. And I even got stuck watching, Dallas from time to time if my mom was in town and felt like watching it. And, I would just play with my toys and have it on in the background. But I always stayed up to watch Friday night videos and, all the music tunes and all of that. And it was, in my opinion, the 1980s. Now, you might say to yourself, why is he telling me about his childhood 80s, fond memory? Because, ladies and gentlemen, for the first time, I can put all of my favorite 80s memories on one tabletop, because we have been talking about the ultimate sandbox game on this podcast over the years. And joining me today is the man behind 7TV and Crooked Dice, and the author of what I cannot tell you how excited I am for 7TV 80s. We have Helena joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Cast Dice. Carl from Crooked Dice. How you doing, brother?
Hey! Hello, I'm good. How are you?
I am so excited. My wife kept asking me why I was grinning like an idiot all day today. And the answer is, we are talking 7TV 80s, baby. The genre pack that we have been wanting for years. Helena, you are the author of this. Welcome to the show. How did Carl get you onto the greatest gaming expansion of all time?
Yeah, hi, Brad. I'm going to flip that around and saying, when did 7TV originally come out? Carl? What, 20?
10 years ago, longer than that now, maybe 12.
I would say about a week after that came out, I said, "So
Yeah.
right, we'll do the 80s, right?" I mean, to the extent that I've got very old files on my machine here, which still says 8TV because that's what I kept calling it, 8TV, 8TV. Yeah, a long time. So yeah, I've been knocking on the door or dragging Carl along. So please, I've got some really great ideas. Some of which we might tell you about.
I'm looking forward to it. Carl, this has been a bit of an ordeal for you. I know that you talked about 7TV years ago. I mean, 7TV 80s years ago. And I don't want to say an ordeal like it's a bad thing. You've had some wonderful things on your plate in the meantime. I mean, we had the second edition. We had all of the different box sets for second edition. And recently, of course, we have the new hardback rules for 7TV that consolidate the whole game. And along the way, of course, we've had all sorts of feature packs that we can absolutely enjoy. But the 80s has always been on the horizon. It's like that digital horizon from Tron. And there it is, lurking. And now the Kickstarter is almost here. Tell us a little bit about the journey that got us to 7TV 80s.
Okay, well, as Helena said, and I think we had requests from customers as soon as we did 7TV. What about 8TV? Is what it almost straight away. So it was always there, but I just kept changing the goalposts. It's entirely down to me. Helena's just been very patiently, sometimes not so patiently when she's been shaking me. Not patiently at all. And so when are we going to do it? So we've been working on it for a long while, and Helena, I mean, at least probably 2 or 3 years, I would have thought, for kind of hard writing on it, but planning kind of years and years before that. It was going to be the next box, and then the world went a bit mad, and I then kind of realigned what the 7TV kind of product line was going to be, and I had to sit Helena down for a cup of tea and a nice muffin and say, I'm really sorry, but it's not going to be a box anymore. It's going to be a book. It's going to be a 200-page jumbo book. But we got there in the end, and a couple of weeks away, and we're ready to go. So
brilliant. Well, I think before we go any further, I have to ask the almighty question, because I always get asked this when I put 7TV on the show or publicly talk about it. People ask me, wait, what's 7TV? They think it's actually a TV station, not actually the world's greatest sandbox tabletop skirmish game. Can you tell us what is 7TV? Because I always do a 10-minute version when I'm sure you can do a 30-second version.
I'll give it a go. Okay, at its heart, it's a skirmish game. It's fun. It's probably on the beer and pretzels end of skirmish gaming. But what we do is we take the conceit that you're making a television program or show or movie, and we've constructed the rules so that terms like hero or champion become star and co-star and extra. And you play script cards and prop cards for your buffs rather than, gear or whatever it might be. So the whole thing is constructed around that idea that you're playing it, and you can recreate your kind of favorite shows on the tabletop. It's a sandbox game as well. So I always describe it as Lego. You can bolt things in and take things out, depending on what you want to do. So it's fairly easy to pick up. All of the many profiles that we put in each of the sets are archetypes. So you'll have a flamboyant spy who might be James Bond or Austin Powers or Jason Bourne, depending on the flavour and the tone that you want to play, or the miniatures that you've got sitting on your shelf that you think, what on earth can I do with those? 7TV will be the game where you'll be able to find something to kind of to hang those on. So it's a lot like other skirmishes games, but it's not. It's a bit different. It's just it's a fun, nostalgic look where you and your friends sit down and go all misty-eyed and look through rose-tinted glasses at those kind of wonderful shows and things that sometimes should be better left in their cases on the shelf rather than put back into the top loader. But we love them anyway.
Exactly. Now, recently, you have delivered the Kickstarter for the core rulebook for 7TV. We have the new hardback book, which I think if you're watching this on YouTube and you want to see all the pretty pictures, and there are a lot of pretty pictures, if you're listening to this, hint, hint, you may want to look up this episode on YouTube. You can see some of the fantastic characters that are appearing in this that visuals will only do justice for. I'm not even going to try and describe them because I will fail. But one of the great things about the new book, because I have so many of the boxes in the past, is there were just countless character cards. And with the new book, you have sort of consolidated those down and streamlined them. Now you can still use the old cards. They still work and they are quote unquote leveled. Again, this is more on the beer and pretzel side, still leveled, still fun. Like you're not going to get blown off the table, but the new cards really do. I don't want to say streamlined because that makes it seem like it's simplified, but it's much more. I don't know. I really like the new character cards. And given that we have all of these wonderful new character cards with stars, co-stars, and extras, I was going through my collection of 80s miniatures / other stuff, going, yes, I have this. Yes, I have this. Yes, I have this. But there's always a few that you go, what can I use this for? And while there's rules in the book to customize those cards to make them fit the miniatures or the character that you want, 7TV 80s has a whole lot more. Can you tell us about that?
Helena, do you want to go here? Because that's
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what we didn't want to do is say take all of the when we started it, Spy-Fi 70s ones, and just say, oh look, and here's the same characters, but they've got leg warmers on, and pastoral jackets with their sleeves rolled up. So I didn't want to go over the same ground. Obviously, and things have moved on a little bit. We got the core rulebook, but essentially, what we wanted to. Where did we come from? I sat down and just let 80s memories percolate in, and I think the advantage we had in working on this, certainly I did, is that Spy-Fi, which is a love letter to 60s and 70s, is something we did kind of grow up with because, full disclosure, I'm born in 69. Really, the 80s is your teenage years for me, right? So I just sat down and I just wrote down lists of my favorite things and then just started to do a little bit of grouping and figure out, in what way is this 80s? So we didn't just want to do a cop, right? And we didn't just want to do a secret agent. So, and we got a special agent, and a special agent covers a lot of ground, but it's essentially all of those guys with really cool vehicles that are generally in black, that might talk, that might fly, or that they might just be hotshot pilots at some air training school. The investigators will be slightly quirky and offhand. I think one of the ones I was really pleased to do. I mean, some of them are laser focused. Nam vet. Nam's late 60s, 70s, but as far as I'm concerned, it's a whole lot of 80s shows. So Nam vet. It feels. Someone said, "Why is that 80s?" Because it was part of our growing up, right? It was Friday night watching Tour of Duty and humming along to Paint It Black. So yeah, we at the top level, the stars and co-stars, and incidentally, I think we got more stars and co-stars for 80s than we generally have, right? And that's because I couldn't help myself, and I was coming up with weird and wonderful ones. Just and going down other routes of we'll probably come on to genres later on, but maybe characters that you wouldn't necessarily think of as being the things that you would use in a skirmish game. We've actually got a profile for a white collar, which is essentially every businessman, single female lawyer, maverick surgeon that you may see in shows except they're involved in a skirmish game. And going down
Head
to the
for business.
extras. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
A head for business.
Exactly. And you realize so much of the 80s shows, again, I tried to get myself to think outside the standard, hey, let's think about sci-fi and action movies and sci-fi and action TV. There's Brat Pack movies, there's soap operas, and there's a whole load of things that maybe not everybody's part of their 80s, but more grim and gritty stuff. Cold War thrillers, BBC, very good at doing Cold War thrillers in the 80s. And touching on the less glitzy, glamorous side of the 80s. Yeah, there's a lot of unemployment, and there was a lot of TV shows showing people doing whatever they had to do to get by, whether that's touring the country in a GMC truck, selling their military services, or selling dodgy gear on an East End market stall and getting into all kinds of scrapes. So yeah, we threw our net quite a lot wider, didn't we, Carl, in this one?
Yeah, this is certainly a lot more, I would say, US centric than the kind of the British focused, arguably British focused 7 TV in kind of intro spy-fi stuff that we originally did, and that's because here in the UK we got all of those glitzy and glammy, the Glen A. Larson hour shows in all their shapes and forms. So that's certainly there, but British TV was a little bit different. It was a bit grim. It's 80s Thatcher's Britain, and it's not the most glamorous of places. I had this conversation the other day. I think that's why here in the UK, arguably, we gobbled up those shows and really embraced them because everything was a bit grey here. But we tried to reflect that as well, with odd job cowboy builders and rogue traders,
yeah,
that kind of thing. So there's a little bit of that, and as Helena said, the Cold War stuff, which we had a lot of. There's 2 or 3 real landmark kind of it's kind of Cold War thrillers that we wanted to kind of reflect as well. So as ever, my 80s is not going to be your 80s, and there's a lot of stuff that we're going to try and cover. The broad kind of blockbuster stuff, I think everyone will recognise. But around the fringes, there's personal taste that kind of comes in as well, and a little bit of where you've come from as well. You can't help it. So I think it's a good spread. It's 127 profiles, so there's a lot in there. But the new genres are nice and cover some of that ground, I think.
Yeah, and they cover things that you don't necessarily think of as film and TV core sources, which I think people will enjoy. And particularly even some of our classic episodes, our sample shows, I think will open up all sorts of possibilities for people. Those people, those guys. Oh, yeah, why not? Why weren't they in a show? Yeah.
We'll get to the genres in a second, but I do want to break it down because I know people are going to ask. We are talking 36 new stars and co-stars in this expansion. We have 88 new extras. We have 3 new vehicles, which is awesome. Now, having been very excited by the vehicles in the new hard rulebook, I definitely have questions about what those 3 could be, because it seemed like every third 80s show of my childhood had a vehicle of some kind stapled to the main characters. Are we allowed to talk about what some of those might be?
Yeah. And there's a couple of things here that I just want to give kudos to Helen about. A lot of the work that was in the core rule book in streamlining a lot of the special effects and things, we did as part of 80's, which we wrote before the core rule book. So a lot of that is already reflected in there, and kudos to Helena for kind of working on that with us. That also meant that there was once we got to the core rule book, we went, we're covering quite a lot in the 80's. There was a whole swathe of vehicles that were written that we went, oh no, they are the super generic ones that we need to have in the core. So there were a lot more, and then we trimmed it down. There were kind of 3 outliers, which are the Electron bike, the school bus, which we had to have because that's, either you're sticking metal plates to it and firing cabbages out of a makeshift cannon that you've put together, or fighting zombies in it, or just going to Sherman Heights School. So that's definitely in there. And what was the other one, Helena? Was it
Supercar?
No, it's the armored
van. Yeah,
the armored van.
That's it.
But there were many discussions very early on about what should we do. 80's is all about the kind of signature vehicle. It's product placement, and it's in all of those shows, but it's not. We felt in the end, on balance, it's not vehicle combat. It's not. It doesn't really happen. There's chases and things that go on, but that's a slightly different whole post-apocalyptic thing where that's happening, which we're not really covering. So only 3, but I think all of those kind of sports cars and supercars and all of the other bits are probably already covered in the core. I feel anyway.
You would not believe how long we spoke and agonized about how do you replicate a digital brain in a Firebird or a Trans Am, and do we need to work out rules for helicopters doing reverse Immelmans? And wait a minute, only one of them talked really, and the other ones were just really cool vehicles. And man, do we have to have rules for driving your car into the back of a truck? And we went a long way down that.
We did, and then actually, probably just to reflect that, a lot of that then fell into stunts, which went into the core rulebook.
Yeah.
So all of that kind of thing wrapped up into kind of and went up front. Really, yes, exactly. Yeah. So the stunts and the things like how can we make cars cooler than just a deployment card, which is really their largely their kind of their purpose. How can we reflect a little bit more tone in them? How can we make them a little bit more cinematic? Just kind of the phrase that the question we kept asking ourselves all the way through the kind of core rule book.
And how can we tie them into certain characters? And we did that with a special effect, which is like that. Hey, anyone can drive a car, but if you've got a particular hotshot special effect, then hey, guess what? You unlock all the other cool stuff where you can jump it over dried up levees. Do all that cool stuff.
Yep, I love it. Well, it makes sense given what I've read about 1980s or 7TV 80s, and having read the core rulebook many times at this point, that it's backward compatible because it was written backward. The other way around. Very excited about that. Let's talk about script cards, because this is one of my favorite mechanics about 7TV. With 7TV, you get, rather than a fixed number of turns every game, you have a deck of cards and you flip it over, and things happen at the start of each player's activation. And as that deck goes down through Act 1, through Act 2, through Act 3, the drama ratchets up. But also the effects on the tabletop happen. So you might have, someone's written out of the script or written back into the script. So someone who'd been eliminated earlier in the game comes back, or there's a set malfunction and all of a sudden either a set piece disappears or moves on the table. Basically everything you would imagine from a bad TV show or movie happening, looking behind the scenes, and maybe have that happen. A stormtrooper hitting his head on the doorway, that kind of thing. Not naming any movie in particular, but you have that happen throughout a game of 7TV. Now, the 80s genre pack has its own new script deck that represents the 80s and what happened in those shows and those movies, more so than, how should I say, the generic deck that comes with the game. Am I getting that right?
Yep.
Yes. The core rule book, again, it was because they've been written the kind of the other way around. The core rule book covers all of that core kind of production meta, because there we can get the tone in that you're making a kind of a TV show. When we started 80s, I think it's fair to say we've done that 3 or 4 times now in the other sets. How can we theme it and tone it? for something a little bit more iconic around 80s. Helena, I'm going to hand over to you now because it was your.
Yeah. So going way back in time before core rulebooks, and I think even before fantasy, the fantasy set came out, I really wanted iconic quotes to be part of the 80s game. And again, they were called one-liners for a long time, and it was almost like another attack. This might sound familiar to those of you that know 7TV from fantasy onwards, and it was a cool thing. And my head is full of, as with many people, full of quotes, and I wanted to weaponize those, and also it's a great touchstone, right? So but then when fantasy came out and it had the presence attack, and I'd in parallel been doing something slightly similar, but arguably a bit more, a little bit too fussy on dice rolling. We had a long discussion about, we still want to keep that quotability, those 80s dialogue, nostalgia things as something cool. Let's kill two birds with one stone. And the countdown deck became the script deck, and we used those quotes there. I should say a couple of other things about those cards, actually, which are pretty cool. They've got interesting little coloured dots down the bottom, haven't they, Carl? I can't remember.
Yes.
They
do. They have the genre symbols on them now, yeah.
Yeah. Because, and forgive me, this is a bit when I'm a little bit out of date. I think we're tying script decks into potential genre-specific cool stuff you can do as well. Right?
Yes, that's absolutely right. So it's an advanced rule if people want to play it, but you now get, and again, this is something that was developed when Alan was writing 80s about having more genre-specific things that your cast could do. So that there's an optional rule when you turn over that script deck, and if the symbol marries up to, that's it, to the genre that you've decided to play for that, you have access to some extra cool special abilities on the back. So again, it's where can we get that tone in as much as possible. So the ones in the core rulebook are the one Brad's is adventure, action, horror, fantasy, and so on and so on. And in 80s, we've got Cold War, Frightmare, Greed and Glamour, Hired Help, Rebel State, and Silicon Dream. And we started off with, I'm going to set another couple. I think we had about 7 or 8, maybe.
We had one more. It was called On the Run, because
That's right.
there's a lot of shows about people going from town to town, and I went I went a long way down that route. I had a classic episode that let me see. It was a scientist who turns into a big green guy, a decommissioned military robot that has short circuited, one or two women in a car who just want to keep going, and a smart German Shepherd dog, and they would go from town to town solving crimes. But you know what? A lot of decisions come down to the fact that I don't like odd numbers, so we had to get rid of the 7th one, and Hired Help was a perfect place for a lot of those drifter types. But yeah, and a lot of this was about trying to make genre more part of the game during the game. I think up to then, genre was really just a way of generating a cast, right? And that was your pick list back in the day. But once you start playing the game, you didn't really think about it. But we wanted to remind players, hey, you've got some guys who are kind of spooky, and this is how their games work or their casts work. And it also, I think, brings home one of the cool aspects of the game, which is X meets Y, and that's my cast versus your cast, and they don't necessarily have to be in the same genre, just like in TV shows. Some of my favorite shows and movies, I mean, going way, way, way back, you're talking about video stores opening up. I was desperate to watch something called Zone Troopers, because it was aliens versus soldiers, and it in no way, reader, matched up to the cover or my expectations. But the statement still stands. I like X meets Y, right?
So. That's at the heart of 7TV, because I've got the same love. You know, it's whether Starsky and Hutch meet a cult, or BJ and the Bear
Yeah.
has a vampire in the back of the truck. It's all of those weird mashups that you get. It was like, yeah, mainly because it had monsters normally. Honestly, I'm as simple as that. But
Yeah, you're not alone.
yeah, no, I loved all of that.
Am I the only one that's thinking of Abbott Costello versus
Oh no,
Dracula
alone.
and sorry,
Yeah.
Frankenstein? Yep.
You are
one of
not
my
alone.
favourites.
The original Monster Mash.
Yes.
I'm a big Universal horror fan, and yeah, for me, I didn't care that it was comedy. Comedy was even better. I mean, I happened to watch a movie last night. It was a 2000s remake of a classic 80s film, and it was spooky ghosts, but with snarky, wisecracking scientists. And I love comedy meets scary. You know, that for me is a sweet spot. That's a sweet spot, which you can have here. Hired Help meets Frightmare. That's what those shows are.
I love it. And there's game effects, as you say, that you can play out for each one of these genres. Because as you said, having played the boxes previously, I have not actually had a chance to play using the new rules yet. And they're not new rules. It's a combined, consolidated rule book, still 7TV second ed, but there are a few changes. The genre is a big one. And I think the way you described that was beautiful, because it really did just bring it home that it's not just something you do. Oh, I have, ghost hunters versus, mutants who happen to live in a sewer who really enjoy pizza. That kind of thing on a tabletop. Those two genres might actually kind of marry up. But once you start getting into really out there properties that I know people are bringing into this game, anytime you go to the 7TV Facebook page, you're seeing all kinds of crazy ideas in the best possible way. But having these genres and having effects that then play out that tie to the script cards is really clever, because all of a sudden, when you're playing horror, it really does start to feel scary. Whereas if your cast is playing comedy, as you were talking about a second ago, your cast starts to operate differently, and the cards will have different effects for your models, which is just awesome.
I guess it probably just reflects, I'm speaking for Helena here, and this might be true, but our approach to the way that Helena and I and our group of games together in there, we always leaned into the genre, even if it was to the detriment of the character. So it's just trying to reflect that and reflect that tone as much as possible wherever we can in the game. Now, we've bolted the genre things in as an advanced rule, so you might not want to play it straight out of the gate, but once the veteran players in there, I think it's something they'll enjoy. So you'll see more of that now with the genre guides, because that's what they're there for. So.
Awesome. Well, you did mention episodes from a 80s TV, 8TV back catalog, different ideas that you can play out on the table. Can you talk about those a little bit? Because I love this idea.
Shall I take that, Carl?
Yeah, these are my favourite things, but I'm going to hand this over to Helena.
Thank you. Yeah, this is my favourite bit. To be honest, working on the game's great. It's a way for me to be the writer, director, producer, and casting manager for every TV show I wanted to see and every film I wanted to see. Right, very briefly, let's see if I can go through these. I'm going to try to do them almost in alphabetical order. We've got 8 Battalion, or 8-Battalion, and that's a whole bunch of Vietnam vets who have been downloaded into an advanced military mainframe which controls all of America's nuclear arsenal. But unfortunately, a crazy person has recoded it to look very much like an 80s arcade cabinet game set in the jungle. And so we definitely need to upload some NAM vets into there. So yeah, there are bandana clad musclemen taking on sideways scrolling creatures. I love video games. I always loved video games. Much of my 80s was spent shoving coins into cabinets in dark and dingy places. It felt right to move into that. So you will see a lot of video game references in here.
Yeah.
What
Can I
else?
just
Go
mention
on.
the villains that the 8th Battalion fight?
Oh my God, yes.
Uh,
You know, I like a pun.
the Viet Cong. And could you describe that for me, Helena?
The Viet Cong is a giant ape.
I
Wearing
just got it.
straw hat.
Brilliant.
Yeah. He's terrible. He's out there in the jungle somewhere. He's a
Barrel-throwing
bad guy.
terror.
Thank you very much. Yeah, the computer's called Vidnam, and you know, sometimes I work from a pun backwards. I make no apologies for that whatsoever. Right, what else have we got? Very briefly, Carl, go and tell us that this was my original idea, but I think you love
I'm
it.
gonna say,
You love it more
Alien
than
War
me.
2. Alien War 2.
Alien Dead.
Alien Dead 2,
too.
sorry.
Yeah, I yes, it's a franchise, and we've gone with the second one. Alien Dead 1 was just about a load of spooky undead things, and there was one survivor in a space freighter. But Alien Dead 2, the lone survivor, who's a guy called Ash. I just came up with that name. He's sent back to take on the dead on some abandoned outpost. But there's a load of cynical military types going on with him. Maybe some guys from corporate, from some megacorp. Nobody you would have seen in a film, or at least not in that film. Let me be very clear on that. What else we got after Alien Dead? Let me see. Is it?
We have got Scream House.
Oh, right. Okay. Yes. So that's when 80s horrors, you know, you'd see the first one at the cinema, and the rest you just go and get out from the video rental. So we wanted to do one of those things that's got a little bit of the spooky serial slasher in it, a little bit of, you know, those guys with masks that you can't kill, and an awful lot of teenagers putting up a fight. So there's the Scream House franchise, and we've gone for Scream House 3. This house turns up in different cities in every movie, by the way, and that's a lot of fun. And there are various survivors from the previous movies in there, and various villains as well. There's a spooky witch that lives in your dreams. There's a shark masked serial killer. I think he's called Sharkface. I'm very pleased with him. We've got now, from a long way back, I was inspired by a movie poster, which is in no way an action movie, but it's a very stylish guy on a bike. Possibly it's a purple bike. He certainly wears purple, and I always thought he would make a great 80s hero. Because look at it, he's on a bike. The bike almost certainly talks to him. So we went with that. Do you want to tell folks about that, Carl?
The Hi-Fi Adventures of Neutron Nelson and the Rocket Revolution, you mean? To give it its full title. Yes, this was, I think, it was a mashup of two different ideas from us, which was Helena's, all those actors all those singers that turn up and want to act in the 80s movies. What if they were all in a thing together?
Yep.
And I said, yeah. And what if it was a bit Buckaroo Banzai? I think so. Somewhere between that kind of mashup of things, and also the artist formerly known as. It comes with normally his own entourage, which was a kind of a perfect kind of super team fit.
Absolutely.
So we've got various people appearing in that who are all very cool. Obviously,
I was going to say, can I jump in? I'm particularly pleased with the digital hologram of a Scottish girl that hangs around with him. She's called Modem Girl.
Yes.
Again, all praise to the pun that comes first.
And the Numanoid as well is also particularly good.
There's a lot of electronica people there, I've got to say. He's got some minions called craft workers. Yeah. What else we got, Carl? I've got the list up. Go on.
Odd Jobbers.
Odd Jobbers. You have to say it like that. Odd Jobbers. All right. So not all the shows are obviously American, and we did a UK TV show. A lot of UK TV shows were about people trying to make ends meet and taking on weird jobs. We mashed that up with supernatural stuff. And obviously there's some big name movies where you get supernatural people taking on tasks. So we've got the Odd Jobbers. They're a bunch of British guys, unemployed. There's a market trader. There's a bricklayer from Newcastle. There's a guy who's a boxer, a bit of an ex-con. They've got hold of some knocked off supernatural equipment for dealing with the paranormal, and they just go around the country dealing with things. And in our classic episode, the things they're dealing with is some rampaging asphalt tarmac, which in an episode I'm calling the blobs from the black stuff. Wherein the good folk of Liverpool are under attack from animate road surfacing materials. But there's a whole load. I've got loads of episodes of that I'd love to do. We've got a nod to the standard, very popular maverick wisecracking cop movies, whether that's set in Beverly Hills and or in a skyscraper in Los Angeles, or whether there's one cop who's crazy and one cop who's getting too old for this nonsense. There's a whole load of those. We've placed that down in Florida in a movie called Orlando Heat, in which some enterprising terrorists have taken over a theme park, which, oh God, I think it's called something like Alligators Neverland or something. Anyway, closed for the summer, folks, but they've taken it over anyway. We did want to get out of our UK US bubble a little bit, and again, we watched other stuff when we were growing up. And all credit to my brother Morgan here for this one, Outlaws of the Black Stump, which is set in Australia, and it's a strange group of Australian folk who travel around the outback in a rather odd looking bus, solving crimes and helping people in trouble every week, usually by dealing with corrupt officials and almost certainly cobbling together machines that fire vegetables at the miscreants. I could go on. We tried to make glitzy soap operas more cool and fun to play, so we came up with Santa Clara. We mashed up all of those aspirational soap operas with big shoulder pads, big hair, and cutting one-liners with the sort of corporate sci-fi stuff you'd see towards the end of the 80s, where they're creating the future of law enforcement, man-machine cops, and the like. So we've got a Skyscraper Under Siege featuring the very cream of cut glass accented British actresses versus ninjas and cyborgs, which I'm quite pleased with. Screamhouse we've mentioned. We did want to do space opera. Space opera is obviously a big part. Star Wars 77, but let's face it, Star Wars dominated all our childhoods throughout the 80s. So we went in one particular direction, which is paying homage to all of those cheaper sci-fi movies, maybe produced in Italy. And this is another little meta nod to fantasy, right, Carl, with Minerva Aventura. Yeah. So we've tied that in. We've got Star Killers, which has an Italian name, which is something like Assassini Stellari. I'll have to go and double check with my sister-in-law for that. It's very shiny. It's very shiny. There's a lot of petroleum jelly on the lenses. It's all very disco, like all of those movies, not those ones, but those ones. Yes, two others: Swordwinder, an immortal swordsman, doomed to walk the earth. Gets mixed up with a feisty lady from New York. I think she plays the cello. Yeah, I'm pretty sure she plays the cello. She's and they get mixed up in Southeast Asia with an undying Chinese sorcerer and all of his minions. Yeah, that's a lot of fun. And what else have we got? Oh, I didn't mention. That's it. Oh, no, I didn't mention Pitch Darkness. Again, Cold War. There's that grey men in grey suits. Who's the traitor? Someone's trying to start nuclear war. It's not James Bond, but there's a lot of that. So that's like a UK West Germany series. Takes place in Germany during a friendly match between England and I think the Russian football team, or the Soviet football team at the time, and they've got some surprising strikers there who definitely will crush you. And if he dies, he dies. So yeah, that's quite cool. And last but not least, US Aliens, which I can't believe I'm the first person to think of that as a name. But yeah, it's what did I call it? Hughstown, Illinois, has been invaded by visiting aliens who wanted to be our friends, but they're not. So a whole bunch of high school students, geeks, nerds, math heads, princesses, all jocks, all of those have taken to the wilderness to fight off the visiting aliens, and they may be accompanied by one or two friendly aliens who just want to go home. Those, yeah. Sorry, I've gone on way too long there, but I love them so much.
I mean, my face hurts from smiling so much listening to this. I want to play all of those games, and I think I have a lot of those miniatures painted behind me. I cannot wait to see these on the tabletop. That is amazing. So I can talk about this all day, but let's start talking about the Kickstarter. When does the Kickstarter go live, Carl?
We'll be going live on the 1st of October, which I think is a Sunday, and we'll run for about 2 weeks or 15 days. So we'll end on the 15th. So tend to do them for 2 weeks. Seems to work. So yeah, we'll be back on that, launching it in the evening of the 1st.
There you go. Well, let's talk about the different ways people can jump on this, because this is not your first Kickstarter. You are an independent game developer. Crooked Dice puts out a very fine product. And having spoken to several people who have picked things up, but aren't necessarily familiar with Crooked Dice as a company, you have a fairly flash website. And I've had a few people go, well, why are they using Kickstarter? Because though the product is very nice, this is an indie game. This is not a mass-produced game company putting out, massive game company putting out a game, having its own shops in different cities, or even, tons of employees. Yeah, I was going to say a shop. Carl, how many are you?
It's me. It's Anna, my wife, who does a lot of the mail order, and then me standing on the shoulders of giants. Whether that's Helena, who has worked with us from the very, very early days of kind of 7TV, some wonderful kind of sculptors and illustrators, and a little bank of writers that we've developed over the years, some of which from kind of Edge Hill. But the company itself is just me and kind of Anna as a full-time thing. I'm just lucky enough to have got some skills. I'm a graphic designer by trade, so all of the artworking and the bits of it, that's the bread and butter thing. That's the easy thing to do. So I can make it look shiny. Hopefully everything else stands up behind that. So
we should do a little shout out to some of the art from the 80s game, I think, and
yes,
name our fabulous artists.
So the cover of the book has been illustrated by the amazing Steve Brotherstone, who, if you've bought any of the recent 7TV products, he illustrated Dracula with a lot of the portraits for this. He has done portraits for all of the stars and co-stars on the profile cards of this, and all of the props and MacGuffins as well. So when we did the core rule book, we wanted to kind of just raise the bar a little with the quality of the art and the stuff that we were using. So they'll all be illustrated again. Dave Needham has also helped out with some of the kind of graphic design elements that we've got in the core rule book and this as well. So yeah, they've been fantastic. Who else have I forgotten? Artist wise, we've got Ernst, Ari Nielsen, Mark Evans have worked on this. George Fairlam has done a couple of bits and pieces as well. So some great sculptors that we've been lucky enough to work with to kind of broaden out the miniature range as well.
Absolutely. And oh man, just to go back to what we were saying a second ago, though, because you are a smaller game company, and I don't say that to maybe be embarrassing, it's to point out that would I be shooting beyond my mark here by saying that having these Kickstarters for each one of the feature packs and for the new hardcover book that's come out has allowed you to create and put these things out?
Yes, it does. I mean, Kickstarter is there to generate capital really for small creatives that don't have it by any other means. We wouldn't be able to do them really any other way. We've got a really loyal and brilliant kind of following that we've built up over the last kind of 12 years or so. But yeah, we probably wouldn't be able to do those without it. It's a good model. We've got our direct sales that we've got, but as you've seen from the quality of the product, I don't like to kind of skimp on that. So there's the fair chunk of change goes into kind of the publication and the printing and paying the artists and paying Helena and everybody to kind of get to that point. So it's a great model. I mean, it's been around for a while now. It seems to work. So we do about 3 a year, I think, and sometimes a little bit more if it's a smaller one. But it's worked. It's allowed us to grow, and we've got plenty now in the background as we wait for the core rulebook and some of the other stuff. There's more genre guides being worked on and more feature packs, which are like our scenario packs as well, that we've got knocking around. So there's lots and lots coming now. I think 7TV, I wanted to get to the point with 7TV that we could just support the game a little bit more beyond the boxes. And now that we've got that kind of the core rulebook there, it's freed us up a little bit to work on lots of other stuff.
Well, let's talk about how people can jump onto this Kickstarter. So there are many different pledge levels, which we mentioned earlier. As always, we have the basic pledge level of the genre guide only. So just like we saw with the core rulebook, you can just get the guide itself. And as you said earlier, just like the rulebook, it's a hardcover book. It is 200 pages. It's £20. And that makes you also eligible for all the free stretch goals that go through. There are 2 types of stretch goals. Some you can pay for if they unlock like miniature packs. Others are free, and we'll go through some of those a little bit later. But if you just want the book to add to the shelf, to read and laugh and enjoy and smile and bring back all those warm nostalgia feels and hopefully get them on a tabletop, this is a good place to start. If you want to go a little bit further, we have the Gamer Pledge. Now that not only gets you the 200-page guide, you also get 127 new profile cards. You get the genre script and prop and MacGuffin cards in a retro VHS case. Everything you need to play the game, plus, as we said before, all the free stretch goals. Am I saying that right?
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Then we have, and it's got to be the 80s, because we have the Hero Pledge. Now, you get everything that I mentioned in the last pledge. So you get all the cards, you get the hardback book, you get the VHS case, plus you get 8 heroic models. Now, there's all kinds of different things, from witty police officers to, anti-heroes from the future, to psychic children, to all sorts of weird and wonderful characters from the heroic side. Now, if you're into your heroes, or you're more to the point, not into your heroes, we also have the Villain Pledge, where you have the same thing except with 8 villain models. Now, that, of course, also comes with the free stretch goals. And if you're thinking, well, I can't decide. Do I want the heroes? Do I want the villains? Can't I have both? Why, yes, you can. That's called the Director's Pledge. Now, that has everything we've talked about in one handy dandy pack. You get 16 models. You get the book. You get the VHS case with all the cards, plus all the free stretch goals, all the bits and pieces. But wait, there's more. It's almost like this is an 80s informational commercial late night. We have the All-In. Now, the All-In has everything we've talked about, but all the goals, all the stretch goals for this Kickstarter, and there are a lot, all of the ones that I mentioned before that are paid goals, you get for free. Carl, can you explain what the thought process was for the breakdown of these?
Yeah, well, really, it was Often we find with kind of Kickstarter, people kind of come in at the end and go, "Yes, I'll have that," and then wander off until they kind of get the notification that the thing's funded at the end. But they sometimes miss out on some of the kind of the cool extra bits that come along the way. So we thought this way just wraps it up in a big bow for them. They can have it all in one go, and this is regardless of whether they get unlocked. They'll kind of go into production and get that. So there's a mix of different things that we've tried to cover. Some of the genres in there, like the sort of continuing with our galactic marines and our electron guards. We've tried to get some Cold War in there, so we've got a nice set of kind of Soviet types. Some monsters, always got to have plenty of monsters in there. And I've tried to do a mix of physical add-ons that you can get, free stuff, which will be print upgrades or extra bits like a poster, for example, and then add-ons for a kind of a new miniature if you want to add that to your pledge, or as you said, with the all-in, you'll get all of that. You'll get all of that anyway. So hopefully something for everyone and a bit of variety as we go through, including something for our 3D printing kind of market as well. We've got some STLs there of some various bits of terrain and vehicles and a couple of figures that you can that we've dropped in. So
I just have to say my favorite meta game within game within game within game within Kickstarter within thought process ever is not only when you get this, do you get it in a VHS case? All the bits and pieces outside of the book, obviously. But then one of the Kickstarter goals, stretch goals, is shelves, STLs of shelves that you can print from a video store in the 80s. I never knew I needed that until I saw it. And now I desperately need it. And I think in describing this to my wife, there are so many miniatures from this Kickstarter that I didn't know I needed until I saw them. And now I can't live without them. You have clearly put a lot of thought and time into 70s, 80s. I know we've been waiting for a long time. I have been one of the loud, well, in Australia, maybe one of the loud people banging a stick, kind of far away. But my God, have you delivered with this? It looks sensational. Thank you so much for coming on, guys. It is always a pleasure to talk shop, Carl. Helena, it was an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. Clearly, this has been a labor of love, and I can't wait to get it on the tabletop and to play out my Friday nights. I'm going to get some pizza. I'm going to get some soda. I'm going to put it on the table, and I'm going to put some movies on in the background and some 80s music, and I'm going to live my best life. This is the best. Amazing. Any final words, Helena? Anything that you think that we've missed that people would want to know about this?
I guess as will always be the case, some people will say, "Hey, what about fill in blank?" That was their absolute favorite thing. I can only say the rules are there for you to adapt things. There's one or two that I know just aren't part of my cultural lexicon, and that's just, I'm not no judgment. It's just didn't appear on TV, but it's there for you. The other thing I'd say is, like I said, my 80s probably started with Star Wars and probably ended with the first bars of the Twin Peaks theme tune. So if you see stuff and say, "Hey, wait a minute, that appeared in 1978, curse you," so, yeah. But let's face it, it was playing all the way through the 80s. And I was probably taping the theme tune off of the TV all the way through the 80s as well. So I really hope you like it. And I'd love to hear what you make of it when you get your hands on it.
Carl?
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone that's kind of contributed to get to this point, from Helena to Steve to Ernst and Ari and Matthew, that have kind of done all of that work kind of in the background to get us to this point. I'm really excited for everybody to see it. I know that it's been a long wait, including Helena as well. so thank you for your patience, and I hope you enjoy it.
No, and thanks to Carl for giving me the chance. When else are you going to get a chance to do what I did, which is just make up the 80s movies that should have been that never were. So it's just, it's an awesome opportunity. So thanks again to my oldest chum.
It's a pleasure, my darling.
Now, Helena, I know you need to roll, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask Carl about future feature packs. Are you cool to hang out for a minute, or do you need to roll?
Yeah, you go for it. I can make my apologies elsewhere. There, go for it.
All right. Carl, tell us all about what's coming, because some of the things that you've told us the last time you were on when talking about the rule book, now that we know what's coming in 80s, just give us a little taste, give us a little flavor, because you have some wild stuff coming for 7TV.
Okay, let me get on my big list of all of the genre things that feature packs that are coming out. There's a lot. Right, so we've got Manta Ray 5 going at the moment, which will be shipping out before the next one starts. And then, oh goodness me, where should we start? Okay, we've got Steel Justice. I think I have to say Steel Justice is the way you have to say it. Which is an urban war zone somewhere in the US, and a cyborg cop making his way through that particular city, which Glenn Allen has written for us. Kings of Kung Fu City, which I'm still working on in the background, or trying to in there, is my ode to button mashing kind of side-scrolling beat-em-ups, which is the only game I can actually play, and that's just by literally just doing that repeatedly. I have no skill otherwise. What else do we have? There's the next Kickstarter after this one will be Beneath the Mountains of Madness, or is it Beyond the Mountains of Madness? I keep getting that wrong. Which will be we'll see the OSR from Lurkers from the Deep returning to going back to the Antarctic to find out some exciting mysteries there. We have Warlord of Dragon's Peak, which is a nice little kind of fantasy ode. We're working on the genre guide for that at the moment. That's the one that people keep asking me for, because the box set sold out too quickly. So people kind of are after fantasy. So I think we might get that one out first, and we've got a feature pack for that. Tales of Robin Hood we're working on. Magnificent 7TV, which will probably be a genre guide in its own right, as people fight in the writer's room to work on that one. We've got quite a big draft about Helena for years. Have been saying, want to do a cowboy one, and Peter's also been saying, want to do a cowboy.
Peter as well, yeah.
We
may do a quick draw to see who gets to.
I think that might be the best way. So we've got that. We've got Night Terrors, which was one of the projects that Edge Hill worked on last year, which is our small town cosmic horror. That is what if Stephen King wrote a story that was kind of directed by John Hughes and maybe kind of scored by John Carpenter. So that's full of 80s joy. Dead on Arrival, which will be the relaunch of the Paranormal Exterminators guide, which will be 80s themed. That's been written and ready to go. And we've got a few other ones kind of knocking around as well, but that's the most kind of immediate things. And we're working all of the genre guides as well. Intro Spy Fire is a pretty good draft. Apocalypse is a pretty good draft. So we'll be working on we are working on all of those in the background.
I was going to say, and when are you going to have time to sleep? I mean, you
sleep when I'm dead, it'll be fine.
Oh. Well, that's exhausting. And on that note, I think, Carl, please continue to do what you do, because every time I'm like, yeah, cool. I'm all set. 80s is out. I'm good. I'm going to be good for a while. Fantastic. And then you started listing things. I was like, yep, I need that. Yep, I need that.
I probably forgot a few too.
I need that too. You're a mad genius, my good man. Keep it up. Please don't stop, and please come back, because I want to talk about all of those things. Carl, again, love your work. all the best with the Kickstarter. Ladies and gentlemen, please go to Kickstarter at the beginning of October. Please look up 7TV 80's. You can find us there. Please do support. Carl does use the funds from these things to, create the products that we've been talking about here. And he's got, this one has had a lot of work put into it, and I know I am backing it literally the minute it goes live. So again, Helena, a pleasure having you on, a pleasure to meet you. And thank you for coming on today.
Thanks a lot, Brad. I've had a great time.
Till next time, Carl.
Can we freeze frame without...
Have we done?
Get some Simple Minds playing, please.
I didn't know what you were doing for a minute. Love it. Love it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. It has been a wild couple of years through COVID and everything else, but Cast Dice has chugged on through, and we will continue to move forward into the future. Thank you to everyone who's reached out in the last couple of years / since Cast Dice has started. This show literally would not run without all your support. I mean, we've had such nice messages coming in the last couple of months in particular, as people know that I'm running towards episode 200. And yes, we almost talked the Bolt Action Alliance 2023 mission guide that I wrote, or a scenario pack, but I figured I did that on the Tabletop Tommy. So if you have not listened to me appear on the Tabletop Tommies recently to talk about that mission pack, please do listen. I didn't want to retread the same ground and take away from their excellent episode. They are wonderful hosts, and it was a pleasure to be on their show. But again, thank you for listening. Friends, I don't say this often, but if you are watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. I can't believe I just said that out loud. And if you are listening to this on your favorite podcatcher, I don't say this very often, but the algorithms out there are more podcasts than ever. Like every other third white man on the planet, I have a podcast. And if you could, Pretty Panda, please, say something nice and or give us a 5-star review. It would help other people find the show in the future. Also, please tell your friends and family, any of them who happen to like games, that this show exists. And as always, if you have something that you would like to send in or a request for the show, or you just want to say, that you loved or hated or disagreed or agreed with something I've said, please do go to the Cast Dice Facebook page, CASTDICE. If you message the page, you're guaranteed a response by me. My name is Brad. Hi. And I do get back to you. But just remember, I am in Australia and I do occasionally sleep. So it might take a couple hours. On that note, I think it comes down to what our good buddy Casey always says. When you are playing the games that we know and love, I hope that your dice are hot. I hope your beverages are cold. But more than that, we at Cast Dice hope that you are having fun. Stay safe out there, guys. And God, it's been a ride. Thank you for listening. Good night.